મારું અવાજ નથી આવતું. કરી દીધું. મેં તો કરી દીધું. 1 મિનિટ.
Hello, good morning, all of you. It's
Good morning, all of you.
again a very pleasant morning for us. We welcome you all on behalf of Sri Ramakrishna Institute of Computer Education and Applied Sciences. I, Dr. Chami Patel, welcome you all in the 3-day online workshop of ReactJs Day 3, the last day of our workshop. Welcome, Fatima. In last session, Fatima gave us very nice concepts regarding the basic implementation of React for prop. How can we use the prop and other functionality? It's a very important thing to learn because in the starting, we must have to clear with the basic concept of the implementation. So we hope today you all enjoy with the next more relevant functionality of the Reacts and more relevant demos given by the Fatima. Fatima, now over to you. Please take
Okay.
over.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is our day 3 of the workshop, and I hope you enjoyed the last one. And so, first, before we start with the next set of presentation, next set of topics that we are going to cover today, I want to know whether you have any questions regarding the last session, or if any one of you tried creating a React project on your own, and if you face any difficulties or anything, please comment down below and let us know, and I can answer any questions, any sort of questions for you. So let's start with the presentation. Okay, I hope you're seeing my screen. Now let's start. Before we start with the new topics, let's take a quick recap because a lot happened in the last session. So I want to cover which topic we covered and which topic we are now going to cover in this presentation. So last time, what we covered is we first discussed what is React and who developed React and how React works. We also talked about what React prerequisites we would need to get sort of started with the React. What information, what the technological information, and what sort of technology that we need to know before starting the React. We talked about that. And we talked about various features of React. We talked about state and props. We talked about JSX. We talked about virtual DOM, life cycle of React, or we can say life cycle of components. And also we talked about components and just a brief definition of types of components that we have. So like I said in the last session, components are the building blocks of React. React is nothing but a group of components creating an entire application. And there are mainly two types of components, a stateful component and a stateless component. Now, in the last session, I used some different names for that. A stateful component is also known as a class-based component, where we can use classes and when we can interact with other components as well. And a stateless component is also known as a functional component. A functional component is nothing but a JavaScript function that we can use to render any sort of UI onto the page. So we are going to continue with the components, and we're going to dive into some details about functional components and class components just to refresh our minds and to get sort of ahead in the components department. So let's start. First, we are going to take the class-based components. So class-based components are simple classes, okay? So in Java, we use classes the same, it's almost similar to the Java classes that we use. We extend the React.component from the React library to create a class-based component. Class-based component can have multiple functions inside that, can have a render function, and it also returns a UI, but it also can have a bit of logic, right? Once a component is declared, it can be used in other components. So a class-based component can be used in other components as well. This is the code snippet that I wanted to show you to demonstrate how a class component is shown. So here you can see that a class component is made by defining a class with a name, whatever you want, which extends React.component package from the React package. So React is the main package where we extract React.component package to define this sample class. Now, we can see that it returns a computer science portal for geeks. It's just a heading. It returns that. And how can we use this particular class component in another component? So this is another component called component example. And how we can use is we can just use that component as a tag in the component that we want to use it in. So here we can see we are using sample as a tag here, and the React will render all the sample component UI inside this component example component. Right? This is how we can use a class-based component inside another component. So one of the main feature that distinguish a class component from a functional component is that a class-based component can have their own states. Also, they can communicate with other components in the app. So you can pass you can use each component with each other. You can contact with each other. Also, we can have states. We can have variables of that, and we can modify those states by calling the setState method. So here is the example of a class-based component with a state in it. So what we are doing here, we are creating a state example component which extends the React component package. We are using a constructor in which we are also initializing the props of the parent component using the super function, and also we are initializing the state of this particular component. Now this dot state equals to change true, right? And then we have a render function, which what does it does? We have a button here, and we are generating an on-click function. On-click, as you all know, is a JavaScript function, and we are calling this on-click function, and we are setting the states of this change, and we are changing here as if it's true, it becomes false. If it's false, it becomes true, right? So it's a So according to the state value, we are displaying the value heading tags also. So if the state value is true, we are displaying this particular h1 tag, and if it's false, we are displaying this particular h1 tag. Right. So this is how we can use the state in a class-based component, and how we can change the value of it using the setState method. So this is the output of that particular code snippet. This is how it will look whenever we will click the button, the h1 tag will change. So this is another example of demonstrating how to use props in a class-based component. So we can pass values or states from parent component to a child component, right? So how we can use that props in a class-based component? So here it is. This is a pass component, and we are using the props that has been passed as in an h1 tag. And this is the main component, or we can say a parent component, a props example. We are rendering the state right here, and we are passing the data right here in the past example, and this is how we can use the props value inside a class-based component. This is all this we have also talked about in the last presentation, but I just wanted to clear things up again so that we do not have any confusion. If you have any questions, please comment down below, and the coordinator ma'am can tell me, and I can answer your questions. This is how it will look. So either we can totally have a state. This is the same example that I showed you in the last snippet. In the last snippet, we just use state, and in this example, we also use props. So I showed you two ways to use a particular set of requirements, by using state or by using props. So in this example, we just use state, and we just change the value of the state and showed the value or the h1 tag according to the state value. And then this example, we disintegrated the already made component into another component, and then passed the data as a prop and showed that data into the passed component or the child component. This is how we can disintegrate components into a smaller component, right? Now, class-based components, as I said before, have also access to various lifecycle functions. We have component did mount, should component update, render, component will mount, etc. All this we talked about in the last presentation, but the functional components do not have access to any lifecycle function. Class-based components only have access to the lifecycle functions. Now, class-based, what is the purpose of having a class-based component and a functional component? So the answer is class-based components can be lighter, slower than the functional counterparts. It is a very almost negligible difference of the performance, but and you will not notice it in a small application at all. In a small application, whether you use a class-based component or a functional component, it doesn't matter. But take an example of a project like Facebook or Instagram, where thousands and thousands of components are used in an entire application. At that point of time, the usage of class-based components and functional component becomes very important. At that point of time, what you use becomes important in regards to your performance of the web app, right? So if as the number of components increases, and for an example, if you have just used class-based components, then it will be a problem with the performance. It might create a problem with the performance. So class-based components are slightly slower than functional components because class-based components have their own states. They can communicate with each other. They have life cycle functions. So they have sort of lots of functionalities added to it. And functional components are nothing but just JavaScript functions returning a UI. Hence, it is slower, but you should be mindful what you use according to your requirement. Because as your app increases, those decisions will affect your performance of the application. Next up, we have functional components. So functional components, as I said, are the more common components that we use in React, because some components just need to return a sort of UI. So we do not need any communication. We do not need any states in those. So we can just use the functional component and return the UI. They are simply JavaScript functions. We can create a functional component like here. As we can see, it returns just an h1 tag in the function demo. We have named them the demo function as a functional component. Now, these functions may or may not receive data as parameters. So if we want to pass something, so like props, we can pass it in the functional component, but it is not necessary. This is a tabular view of the difference between a functional component and a class component. So as I said below, functional component is plain JavaScript that accepts props as an argument. So as an argument, as in these sort of arguments, if you pass any data, it will be available right here as the props. And a class component is a more complex one. It creates a class and also has a render function in it and have state variables in it. In functional component, there is no render method, and class component must have a render method to return an HTML. Functional components are also known as stateless components, since they simply accept data as a props and display into the form and display in some form of the UI. Class components are also known as stateful components because they implement logic as well with the use of states and lifecycle function. We impart some logic to it as well. Functional components does not have any lifecycle functions, as I said before, and class components have various lifecycle functions which you can use throughout the lifecycle of the class-based component. So these are the major differences between a functional component and a class component. This marks as the end of the types of component and what are the basic differences between those two, and how should we decide which to use in our application. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I'm just gonna take a quick break of 1 minute. Ma'am, if we have any questions, please let me know.
Yeah, that's only one question. Like, which in class-based component you state the state and prop to display the
Yes.
data. Which one is better?
Uh,
Is there
I,
any
I,
different speed or anything like?
it does is the person asking whether should we use functional or class components, which is better between the two?
Yeah, no. You specify that we can show the data with state also and with prop
Oh,
also.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
so okay, yeah. So my answer to that is if the component doesn't need to be disintegrated into smaller chunks like we did in the props example. So what happens is, let's take an example. We have a search component and we have a list component inside it. Inside the list component, we have separate blocks which we are reusing it in other several components as well. So in that case, we can disintegrate that smaller piece chunk of pieces into different components, and then we can pass data as props to those components and can reuse that component throughout the application. Now, if there is no need of reusing that particular chunk of code, and I just need to use it in one component or two components, I would just use simply state and finish it off. And if I need to have need to have the ability to reuse that particular chunk of code throughout the application, I would disintegrate that code, make it into another component, and pass data as props to it. So I can reuse it in an entire application.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You can move
Okay,
ahead.
so next up we have is higher order components. Now, higher order components is not typically defined in React API. It's more of sort of uh, people have learned to work with it, and it has its own usages. Normally people use it does not use it very often. It's just used when we especially required it. It is not defined. Let me say it again. Higher order components, when you go into the reactjs.org, it is not defined specifically as a higher order component topic. It is more of developers have developed it and introduced it later on as React developed itself as an open source project. So whenever we use React application, so the main concept of React application is reusability, right? So we are creating smaller chunks of components. We are creating we are trying to use the same component various ways, so we can have a smaller number of code base, we can have the performance better. So the one of the major goals of creating a React application is reusability. So what happens is, what happens when we want to share the same functionality across multiple components? We can uh, till now we have seen that we can create a component and reuse that in other components. But what happens when we want to use a functionality over the several components that we have? So for an example, if we want to share a data of a logged in user across the components, in every component we would have to get that data and then process over it and then display it. So to minimize that work, we are introducing a higher order component. Higher order component is nothing but wrapping a normal component or a another sort of component inside a new component and returning a new component. So it sounds very confusing, but it's not. And let's take this diagram. Okay, so we have a container component, which is the entire green part, and we are getting the state as a logged in user. So as I said in the example, what if we want to get the logged in user information across several components that we have? So what this is the wrapped component that I want to use that value in. So what happens is I would pass this wrapping component inside this container component, and this is known as the higher order component. This now becomes a higher order component which returns a component into a new form. Okay, it takes one component and returns another one which wraps the original one inside it. So I pass this particular wrapped component inside this common container component, and the higher order component returns this entire thing to me, which is a completely new component wrapping the original one that I passed into it. Now, let's see an example of that. Okay. So components that receive the state from the higher order component will function as presentational components. Okay. So with the components that I said here, which receives the state of this higher order component, will work as a presentational component. Said state gets passed to them and they conditionally render UI based on it. So let's take an example. Let's take an example that in we have a search form that filters data, right? So we have let's say we have a JSON with all the state values and everything, and we have a search box. We write something onto it, and then the preferred locations get filters according to it, right? So this is an example. So kindly please take attention to this because I have added very less theoretical part in this presentation. I've added more examples. So you might have to listen to me very carefully to understand the concept of the higher order components. So our first component, what would we first do is create a component which shows the data according to the JSON. So this is the component that we have. What are we doing here? We are importing React. We are importing a local JSON that we are stored in a different area. We are also importing a location card, which is a separate component. And what you're doing, please mind that this is an ES6 type of coding. If someone doesn't understand this is an ES6 code, so type of code. Okay, so we are creating a component right here, and what we are doing here is mapping or creating a map loop on this preload.data, and we are displaying the value of that location. We are using the location card component. Okay, so whatever you see right here, this each block of location is this location card component. Now, how can we introduce the search box into this particular component, right? So this is the example of how we can use a higher order component and how we can pass that wrapped component inside it. So how can we create a higher order component? This is how we are using constant with search. With search is the name of the higher order component is equal to wrapped component. Okay, this is the component that we are passing inside a higher order component, and it returns a class component. So as I said before, higher order components returns a component wrapping the original one inside it. So this is the new component that it will pass. This is the state variable, the search term. Whatever we will write in the search box will be added to this search term state. This is the function to handle the state, handle the search. And this is the render function which will pass from the higher order component. So what it is, we are adding the search input box, and we are adding the wrapped component right here and passing the search item as the props, the search item as the props in the wrapped component. Okay, so we are wrapping the passed component inside a new component and returning the entire new component. This is the concept of the higher order component. Okay, so this particular example that I showed you is without the higher order component. This is how we can create the higher order component. And now let's see how we can use that particular higher order component. Okay, so this is the change that we will have by using the higher order component inside. So as you can see, the values are same. We are importing React, we are importing preload, we are also importing right here with search. That is a higher order component that we just created, and we are also importing the location card to display the value of the JSON. Now we are okay, so this is the new one that I haven't talked about with you. In ES6, we can do this as well. So what does this statement do? Const in the curly brackets search term equals to props. So in ES6, what does this do is create a state with the name search item and get the value of that particular prop with the name on it. So it handles two functionalities or two steps. It creates a state with the with name search item and assigns a value from the props with the keyword search item as well. So this is a shorthand operation to create a state and assigning a value from the props as well. Okay, so what we are doing here, we are using the preload.data variable from the location JSON. We are filtering the data according to the search item that we have received from the search input box. So we are creating a filter and then mapping those filtered data and passing the location card component to display the final result of the searched JSON, and to export that particular higher order component and wrapping it inside the location. We are using export default with search, and inside the argument we are passing location. If you see the last line of this example, we are exporting the with search component and passing the location as the wrapped component, so that the with search component can pass as a entirely new component with location wrapped inside it. Okay, so this can be a little confusing to understand. So I'm asking everyone if you understood it or whether I can repeat it. Please let us know and let me know in the comment section below. I'm waiting for a couple of minutes for your comments. Ma'am, do we have any questions for the higher order components?
Hello. Uh, Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, no, there is no right now. There is no other question, but
Okay.
there is a one announcement for the students here. Uh, Students, for your benefit, as you can see, we had conducted this program online, and if you are interested for any such more other programs that will going to conduct by our college in future, then it's our pleasure to you. It's your pleasure to grab this opportunity, and for this, we will inform you the same in advance via mail or contact number. So, if you are really interested for any other programs in future, then please provide the particular field we had put it in the feedback, that you can provide your precious feedback, and then we will contact you, as we will like to see you more in other such programs. Thank you so much, students. Any other program, any other question from your side, students? Then please post in comment box. And if you like to repeat this snippet code again, then also you can post it.
Okay. So we are
Uh,
moving on. Yes.
yes,
Okay.
Fatima, go
So
ahead.
okay. So we are moving on from the higher order component, and we are entering into a world of Redux. So Redux is another one of the we can say a little more advanced concept of the React.js. And in this presentation, we are just going through the basics of it. And I suggest after this presentation, you should go to the reactjs.org main website and look into its many of the advanced abilities of the higher order component and Redux and hooks that we are going to cover in this presentation as well. So as the presentation cannot have all the information of each topic, we are covering all the main basic topics that we have for each topic, and we are covering everything so that you can have a jump start in understanding what does these topics or functionalities do in React. So let's just start with the Redux concept. Redux is nothing but a state managing library used in JavaScript apps. Uh, Also, we can say that Redux is used to manage a particular state throughout the application. Okay, so we can also have a React app without Redux. That is not a problem. But let's take an example that if we have a React app with a large number of code base, okay. So at that point of time, there will be a problem managing all the components and managing all the props as well. Okay, so at this point of time, Redux will be very helpful for managing all the states and all the props that we have throughout the application. There are three major principles of Redux. Single source of truth. What does this means? It helps to create universal apps. The state of the application is stored in one object called store. So we are going to cover what the store is in the presentation. But for now, understand that what Redux does is store all the states that we use in the application as a single object, and we are getting that state from one source only. So there is only one single source of all the state objects. This also creates managing the state variables easy. In Redux, state is read only. We can only have a read only state. We cannot change the value of the state directly or by the set state method. We have to call a set of rules to update the value of a state in Redux. So without Redux, we can change the value of a state using the set state method in each component, and each component has their own states, and states are passed via props and everything. But in Redux, as I said, it's a single source where one object is there, where all the state variables are there. So we cannot change that state value directly or by the set state method. We have to follow a certain set of rules to update the value of the state in Redux. Why, you might ask, why is the reason why cannot we change the value of the state by set state method? Let me give you an example. If there are multiple components that using a single state from the Redux store, and we are changing that value in several components at the same time, then that will create a problem managing the value of that particular state in the store. So hence, to create a clean flow, we are introducing the following rules that we are going to discuss in the later section to update the state. We cannot change state of a Redux store directly. They are immutable. Okay, changes are made with pure functions. So change how if we cannot change the value of a state directly, then you might ask how we will change the value of the state. We can change the value of the state by using reducers. Reducers are pure function that take previous state and action and returns a new state. Okay, so Redux have three main building parts. Okay, we have action, we have reducer, and we have store. So just like MVC, and each M, V, and C have different concepts and different tasks that it needs to maintain, Action Reducer Store has also their own set of tasks or own set of areas that they work in. So this is the diagram that depicts how the Redux flow works. So from the view, whenever I want to change a value of a state, I would call up an action, and we will know what are action reducers and storers in later section. So this is the flow of the Redux. Whenever I want to change a value of a state from the view, I would call an action. That action will call a reducer based on its type, and those reducers have the main logic of updating that state value, and that reducer will notify the store, and the store will update the new value of the state. Sounds like a really big hassle, but it is maintained to have a clean flow of how the state is updated, and that store will notify the view that its value has changed, and then you will see the change on the UI. Okay, so let's first start with some actions. Actions are plain JavaScript object that contains information. Okay, actions are the only source of information for the store. Actions are nothing but JavaScript objects which have a type and which have a value attached to it, based on which the reducers get to know what functionality that it needs to perform. Okay. Action have a type field which tells us what type of action we need to perform, and there is also action creators inside it. Let's take an example so that you can understand it quite well. This is an example of an action. Okay, so function add task, and return. What we are returning is a type, add to do, and a task, which is a value that it needs to update. Okay, so this particular object is called an action. We have a type variable where we are adding the type of what do we need to do. It specifies that what does it needs to happen, and this task object will have all the updated value which we need to update or remove according to this particular example. Next topic we have is reducers. Actions, as I showed you here, will tell you what to do. It will not tell you how to do it. So in that particular case, the reducers come into action. Actions tells you what to do, and reducers tells us how to perform that particular function. So what reducers do, they take the current state an action and return a new state, and tells the store how to do that and how to store it. So let's take an example of a to-do list, and we have to add to-do and we have to remove a to-do from the list. So how we can do that? So this is the action to add a to-do list, and this is the action to remove a to-do list from the list. Okay. So if, for an example, if I want to add a topic to my to-do list, I would call this particular action, this add task, and pass my task onto it. Task is nothing but the value that I need to add it. Now, as I showed you, type add to do. Now, in the reducers, we will have an if function which will listen to the action type. So here, if action.type is equals to add underscore to do, what we are doing is we are returning the task, the previously or the current state with the updated one. Okay. Now, before we go any further, I want to make you understand the concept of three dots and this tasks. What does this three dot means? It's a spreader functionality. Okay, so what does this do? It takes the original value of the task, which is the states in our concept, and adds this action dot task that we have passed from here, and add it to the array and creates a new state. Please be mind that states are immutable in Redux. So we always have to return a new array or new object for the state to the store, so that store can identify that a change has been made, and then they can tell the UI that the update has been made, so the UI can update the value on the page accordingly. So what are we doing here? We are creating a new array. We are taking the current value of the task and adding this action.task to it and returning an entire new array. So the store will identify the updated value, and the UI will be updated as well accordingly. Now, what if we have to remove a task from the list? So we will call this particular action, which have a type remove underscore to do, and a task like this. It will go into this particular section. Action.type is equals to remove underscore to do. What does this do? It returns by filtering, by not adding the task that we have added. So as you must already know, a filter or a filter loop always returns a new array. It doesn't it doesn't return the already existing array. It maps through the array that we have passed and returns a new array itself. So by returning a new array or a new um, state array, the store will be able to identify that this change has been made, and the UI will update it accordingly. And we are returning tasks right here. So this is how a reducer works. Okay. So the next we have is the store. Store is nothing but an object which stores the entire state of the application. As I said, in Redux, there is one source where all the state variables comes from. That object is all known as stores. We have three main functions that are associated with store. The first one is create store, which is used to initialize the store or creating a store or a state object. The next one we have is the dispatch action. Now, whenever we want to change the value of an state inside Redux, we would need to dispatch it with the action object inside it. Okay, so this is how we will do it. We will call the dispatch function with the action inside it, so that it goes to the reducer. As I said in this particular diagram, and from the view, we are clicking on a button which will trigger the change. It will call the dispatch function with the action in it, and that action will go to the reducer, and the reducer will see what type of action it needs to perform. It will perform the logic that you have added into the reducer, and then pass the updated data to the store, which the store will reflect it to the UI. This is how the entire flow of the Redux works. So this is an example of using um, all the store and action and the dispatch method. So what we are doing here, we are creating a store in a constant called store, this create store, and the task list. Mind you, task list can be anything, any array or any object or any value as well. Okay. Now what we are doing here, we are using this constant add variable, and we are calling this add task method with the value wake up. Now this add task in the previous example I showed you is the action. And what we are doing here, we are dispatching the store value to this add value. So what we are doing here, we are calling the store value, we are calling the dispatch function with the add variable, which would trigger the action add to do, which will trigger the reducer and would add the task to it. Okay. Now this is how you can add your task. This is how you can remove your task. You have to dispatch the value to the store so that the action gets triggered, and by default the reducer will get triggered and then the store will be updated. Now to get the value of the current state of a store, we can use the get state method of the store. Store.getState will get you the value of the current state that we have inside the application. Okay, so these are the three main functions associated with the store. This is the basic of how the Redux flow works. Now we are going to understand how the React Redux works. Now React Redux is a package. So React, as we all know, React is a library. So library does not do all the things on its own. It needs several other packages on top of it to perform all the functionalities that we have inside Redux. Okay. To implement this particular Redux concept, we are introducing this package React Redux, which is a popular package we developers use to implement the React Redux concept. The React Redux, it does the same thing that as I told you. It has the action, it has reducers, it has store, but it provides a coding way of implementing the Redux concept. Okay. Okay. React Redux is a state management tool that makes it easier to pass the states from one component to another, irrespective of the position. So what happens is, for an example, let's take an example. We have 10 components in our application, and all the 10 components have to use the same state. So managing that particular state will become very difficult as the application grows, because the state will be transferred as props to various child elements. And what happens, well, if we call if we call to update that particular state from all the child components, then that will create a problem in maintaining the flow or maintaining the updated value of that particular state. So to minimize that complication, or to avoid that complication, we use the React Redux package to implement the Redux architecture into our React application. Okay. So React Redux provide a store in which we are using all the states, and from the all the components uses that particular store to get the value of the states. Along with the store, React Redux introduces action and reducers, which work simultaneously with stores to make sure that the state values are always on point or always updated. Okay. To install React Redux into your application, you will need to install it using Node or npm. So to install a React Redux package into your React application, you will need to open a terminal or a command prompt. You will need to open a terminal if you are using an iOS environment. If you are using a Windows environment, you would need to open a command prompt. You would need to traverse through the project folder, and in that folder, you would need to execute this particular statement: npm install React Redux. This will add all the necessary packages that you need to implement the React Redux or Redux flow into your application. By using React Redux, we can have the following benefits. We can reduce the code complexity. We can have easier maintainability of the state. We can also reduce time. So if you're not reusing that state as the props into various components, when we're just using that from a one single source, we can easily get that data. We can update it easily, so that reduces time or the development time of a developer. It also enables a debugging process very easy, because all the data comes from a single source. All the data gets updated from a single source. So hence, debugging that particular process, if you have any error or bugs by uh, in any functionality or any process, debugging gets very easy. Okay, so these are the reasons why we are using Redux flow into our application. You can also have a React application without Redux, but as your application will grow, the maintenance of the state and the props into various components, as your component count of the component increases, the maintainability of the state and props will be very difficult as your application grows. So to maintain all of that, to create a single way of updating a state or storing a state in an application, we are using the Redux flow. Now, this was just the tip of an iceberg that I showed you in the environment of React Redux. If you want to know more about the React Redux and more functionalities that they have, more functions that they have, and how can you have API, how can you call API in the reducers, how can you make Ajax call into the reducers, uh, please go through the reactredux.js.org website and you will get all sort of documentations on it. So this was the main concept of Redux and how we can use the React Redux package into our application, which will enable us to use the Redux flow. Please let me know if you have any questions in the comments down below. I'm waiting a couple of minutes for you. Ma'am, do we have any questions?
Yeah, Fatima. There is one question.
Mm-hmm.
At a high level, what is
Mm-hmm.
virtual DOM, and how does React use it to render to the DOM? About
What is
virtual DOM.
Okay, you have a question about virtual DOM. So
Yeah.
virtual DOM is nothing but the exact replica of the actual DOM that we have. So DOM is the document object model that we see on the page. So what React does, works on a diffing process. Okay. So what
Okay.
this diffing process is, DOM React have an exact replica of the real DOM stored in it. So whenever a user changes anything or any UI value gets updated, it notifies it to the virtual DOM. Now,
Okay.
virtual DOM with the use of diffing process compares the virtual DOM and the real DOM that we have, and only changes the affected nodes, affected div elements or affected p tag or whatever HTML element that has been changed. It only changes that particular element. It does not repaint the entire DOM. So this is how a virtual DOM is helpful to us, as it does not extract all the components and then repaints it again with the CSS. It's just change the affected nodes and then work ahead. So this is how React manages the performance of the application using virtual DOM.
Okay. And another question is, what is prop drilling? And can we
Uh,
avoid it?
Prop drilling is a process to pass the props from one component to another. So what we can have is we can have several nested components inside the React, right? So prop drilling is nothing but passing that same props again and again to various components. This creates a nested chain of the props. Okay, so we can avoid this by using the Redux method. So with the use of Redux, there is one source of state. So we all the components does not have to pass all the values to each other. We can directly access it from the store and update it and then pass it to the store again. So we can avoid the props drilling by that.
Okay, so by actually sharing a global state, we can directly manage with
Yeah.
Redux.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. Neville is having a question
Mm-hmm.
of big, so reply on a comment of the post on Facebook. Something he had posted on the Facebook we call virtual doom. Fine,
Okay.
it's okay. Yeah, Fatima, it's okay. Now you can go ahead.
Okay, great. So now we are entering into the arena of hooks. Hooks is the newest functionality that has been introduced in React. Hooks are the new feature that has been introduced in the 16.8 version of the React. It does not, hooks are not available in the previous version, only available after the 16.8 and version ahead. Now, if you allow, it allows you to use the state or the life cycle features into a functional component. Okay, so as I said before, functional component does not have the ability to create states, does not have the ability to create, to have a life cycle functions in it. Okay, so it just have the ability to return a sort of HTML elements and render it onto the UI. So with the help of hooks, we can add this particular functionality. So we can add the usage of hook, usage of states and usage of lifecycle functions into the functional component. Hooks are the functions which hook into React state and lifecycle features from functional components. Please mind that hooks does not work inside class-based component. Hooks are made specifically for functional components and to make the functional component make the state lifecycle functions or several other functions that we have in hooks available to functional components only. It does not work inside classes. Okay. Now, previously, if you write a functional component and you want to add some state to it, you would do this by converting it to a class or by wrapping that functional component inside a higher order component and then returning to it. Okay, so there were two ways before. So what if I don't want to convert the functional component into a class component, or I don't want to create a higher order component because because it's not applicable to your requirements. So for that particular purpose, hooks are used. Before using the hooks, we need to keep the following things in mind. Only call hooks at the top level. So what does that mean is hooks can only be called at the top level. It should not be called inside loops, inside conditions, inside nested functions. You should not call hooks inside that. Hooks should be at the top level or at the start level of the functional components. This rule is available to maintain the order of the hooks as the component renders. The another thing that we have to keep in mind is only call hooks from React functions. You cannot call hooks from a normal JavaScript function. We can only call hooks from a functional component only. Hooks can also be called from custom hooks. So as we are gonna see ahead, what are custom hooks, but we normal predefined hooks can be called from a custom hook as well. But we cannot call a hook from a regular JavaScript function. It needs to be a functional component. So there are many hooks available as a predefined hooks available in React. We are going to look into two of the major hooks that many of the developer uses. We are going to use state hook and the use effect hooks. There are also use dispatch, use selector. Many hooks are available. You also keep in mind that whenever we use hook, you can either use one hook or two hook. It doesn't necessarily mean that if you add a hook to your application, you need to use all the hooks available in the library. You can only use one or two, or you can use all of them. It is based on you and your requirements how many hooks that you want to use in your component. Doesn't necessarily mean if you use state you have to use effect. It does not mean that. Okay, so we are first starting with the use state hook. Use state hook is one of the most used hooks in React. Use state hooks allows a functional component to have a dedicated state of their own. Isn't that awesome? to use state inside a functional component. Before that, we would need to make it a class component or a higher order component wrapping component. This enables a very simpler code style for React for a functional component especially. So useState hooks allows one to declare a state variable inside this functional component. It should be noted that useState can only be used to declare one state variable. So one useState hook can be used to declare one variable only. Okay, one state only. It cannot one useState hook cannot be used to declare multiple state variables. One useState hook belongs to one variable. If you want to have another one, you need to use the useState hook again and have a separate variable. So this is an example, as you can see, is a code snippet to declare a useState hook. So this is the functional component. In that, we are using const click equal to useState, and then we are passing some value to it, and then we are using it into the return or the h1 or the JSX area. So now this constant click becomes a state of this functional component, and we can use it as a normal state that we do. Okay, so this is how we declare a useState hook in the functional component. Now, how to update that value? We have already saw that how to declare that particular hook, useState hook. But what if you want to update that particular value? Because we normally, generally when we ever use state, the purpose is that we want to add it, we want to change it, and then we want to show the UI based on it. So just having the functionality of declaring a use state hook is not enough. We need ability to update it as well. So hooks allow to update the value of hook like this. So this is a example. In this example, do reference is a functional component, and this is how we can define the function. So in the normal React application, to update the value of a state, we are using set state method, right? So in hooks, what we do, we are declaring the function right here. So we are having the array brackets. Click is the name of the state, and set click is the name of the method that we will be using to update that particular state value. And we are using use state and passing the value of the initial value of the state here, that is 0. We are passing the initial value here. Okay, now how can we update it? So on the click of the button, the on click button, we are creating a function, and we are calling the set click function that we declared right here. And what are doing here, click +1, that is updating the value of the previous hook state, and updating it +1 and setting it. So this is how we can update a value of a use state hook. Okay, so now we saw how we can pass a string value inside the hook. We saw how to pass a numerical value inside the hook. So we can also pass an array or an object inside a useState hook. How can we do that? So this is an example. It's an array example. We are adding a click useState hook. We are adding a set click function to update it. We are passing the initial value as an empty array. Now this is the function that we have called, in which setClick method is called, and this is a separator method. As I told you earlier, hooks does not maintain the state. It always replaces the value that we pass through it. So a set state method, normally a set state method in React adds to the already available state value. If we have an array in a normal React application, let's say we have an array as a state, and if we want to add it, we are calling the updated array and passing to the state. In hooks, it will not add to the current value. it will replace the entire value. So we would need to add this separator functionality to use the current value and add the object that we want to add it, so that it replaces and creates an entire new array. Okay, so it doesn't add to the existing value, it always replaces it. So whenever we use an array or an object in a use state hook, we would need to get the previous value by using the separator method, and then add the whatever value, that we want to add to the array or the object, so that it replaces the entire object or entire array. Now, how can we use it? Okay, so this is how we can use it. Click is an array, so we have to map it to show each value, and this is the value. And on button click, every time of this button will be clicked, a new value will be added to the set click, and the UI will get updated. Okay, this is how you pass an array into the useState hook. This is an example to show how we can use an object into a useState hook. Okay, so let's take an example. This is in constant data. We are adding a data state and a set data function to update the value of the object with the username and password. We are also taking another useState hook with the name form, and set form is the function that we want to have the username and password object. And another third one hook that we are using is submit with the name submit, and function as submitted, and useState with the initial value as false. Okay, this is the print values function that we are using to print the values of the username and password onto the UI. And this is the update field function that we're using to update the value of the data. As you see right here, we're using the separator method to set the data of the value. Okay, this is the JSX part of the example. So here we can see we have created a form, and on submit we are using the value print values function. We are having a label called username and an input text and an input called password. And if on every change of that update field, we are calling the update field function right here. Yeah. And then we are also after if the submit value, submit is this hook that we have updated. So right here, what is it said? If the submit value is true, display the name of the username and display the name of the password. Otherwise, it should not display anything. So do you see any difference between the print values function and the update field function? Why do we replace the value in the print values function, and why do we use the separator functionality in the update field function? So as you can see right here, the form hook or the form state is used to display the updated value below the form right here. So we are not concerned with the previous value in this case. So hence we are just replacing the value of the username and password by setting the form directly. But in the data, we want to have several occurrences, or we want to keep a history of the previous values as well. So to keep the previous value in the data, we are using the separator and then adding the new value to it in at the last, so that we can have a history of all the username and password that has been added to the system. Okay, this is how it will look in real time. We are adding the username, we are adding the password, and then submitting it, and we are showing that value right here. Okay, we are updating the password, and then another one will be shown right here. So these value right here is it comes from the form state, and every time a submit button is called, this value just needs to get replaced. It doesn't need to have a record of previously added values. The only state that needs to have a previously recorded value is the data, and for that we are using the separator functionality. Okay, so this was the use state hook. Please let me know if you have any questions. Ma'am, do you have any questions?
No, Fatima, no more question here. You can move
Okay,
ahead.
okay. So the next hook that we have is a use effect hook. We saw the use state hook, now we have a use effect hook. Use effect hook lets you perform side effects in functional components. Now, as we already know, functional components does not have any access for any lifecycle functions like component did mount, component did update, component will unmount. It doesn't have any access to that. So what happens when we want to generate or initialize or do anything before a functional component gets updated? Okay, so for that purposes, we are using the use effect hook. This is an example of a this is an example of a normal component without hooks. Okay, so this is a class component that we are creating. We are creating a state count 0. We are also having component did mount, component did update, and then the render function that we have. So whenever a component will mount, this particular lifecycle method will call. And what are you doing here? We are changing the document.title value with the count this.state.count value. Okay, and whenever a component will update, where this lifecycle method will be called, and we are again changing the value of the title based on the state value. So as you can see right here, we are reusing the same code for component did mount and component did update. We are reusing that same line into function. Now, in this particular example, it would seem not a big problem, but if you have a large set of code that you want to uh, implement in when the component mounts or when it updates, that will create a problem, and that will not, in my case, that will also be a large set of line of code that is the same line of code, reusing it again and again in this another function. So in functional components, with the help of use effect hook, we can eliminate this reusing the same line of code in different functions. Let's see how we can do that. So this is the new component with the use effect hook. What are we doing here? This is a functional component. We are declaring a count state with the use state hook and a set count method to update it. And we are using the use effect hook. Inside that, we are returning the entire UI that we want to show it on the page. Now, inside the use effect hook, we are also defining the document.title value, right? So where document.title equals to you clicked dollar count, that is the count state that we are adding it. Now, when the use effect will be called, whenever the component will mount, whenever it updates, the use effect will be called. So by using the use effect method, we are eliminating the code replicas. We are just having look at the change. We have changed the class component to a functional component. Also, the line of code has been reduced dramatically. Even for a small component like this, you can see the change we have done for the functional component. So whenever we specify a use effect hook, we are requesting React to execute the function that we passed into the use effect. So this is the use effect, and this is the entire function that we passed in it. So this acts as a function inside use effect. So every time what we are doing is we are requesting React to execute the function that we pass into the use effect as an argument. And every time the component renders, so if it renders the first time or whenever the value gets changed of the state, it re-renders. So use effect will be called whenever a component renders. This is how we can use the use effect hook inside the functional component. Okay, so this was the use effect hook. As I said before, we can also have the custom hooks um, inside the already predefined hooks that we have. What the custom hooks are there? Custom hooks is nothing but creating a JavaScript function which the name start with the use keyword. Okay, so use keyword, it starts with the use keyword always. It can use another hooks inside it. Custom hooks can also use predefined hooks inside it. It can return anything you want, and it can have any parameters that you want. Let's take an example to identify what the custom hook looks like. So here, as you can see right here, we are creating function use custom hook with the parameters initializer and a component name. Every time we want to create a custom hook, we want to prefix it with the use. Mind you, if you would not use the use keyword as the prefix of the custom hook, the React will not know that is a custom hook. So you need to have a use keyword as a prefix for a name for the custom hook. Okay, inside that, what we are doing is we are creating a counter state with a set counter function to update it, and we are passing the initializer value that we passed in the use custom hook as the initial value of that counter. This function reset counter set is the counter to +1, and the use effect hook. See, as you can see, we use the custom hook. We created a custom hook, and inside that custom hook, we already use the use state and already use the use effect, the predefined hooks that are available in React. We use that inside a custom hook. And the same thing works like we are updating the component counter value on the click of that button. Okay, and we are returning that reset counter, and then that custom hook we are returning right here. This is how we can create and define a custom hook for our application. Now, how to use custom hook inside this is an example to show how we can create a separate file or separate custom hook file. Now, but how can we use that custom hook inside a component? So this is how we can do that. This is the component, a functional component. We are creating a constant called click button, and we're using custom hook. We are passing the initializer value. We are passing the component that we want, component name that we are using it. As I said, as I showed you earlier, the second argument is the component name. Okay, we're using it right here, passing that value, and then that on button on click, we are just using this click button constant. As you can see, we have disintegrated the code into two separate sections, and this use custom hook. The custom hooks are only useful to us if we use that wisely, and by that I mean the functionality that we use in a custom hook should be something like that we can use it throughout the application. If we create a custom hook for something that we are using throughout the application, this will dramatically reduce the line of code and will increase the reusability of your code very much. So this is how you create and use a custom hook inside a component. This marks as the end of the hooks part of the React. We saw how hooks are useful. We saw how hooks are created. We saw the two most used hooks in React: the use state and the use effect. And we also saw how we can use a custom hook inside a component and how we can create it. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Ma'am, do we have any questions?
Yeah, one is mainly the feature of hooks is to use this feature without class. Is there any other option like hook to write the any functions without the class?
No, hooks is the new functionality that has been introduced mainly for a functional component to use these states and the life cycle method, similar to what life cycle methods allow. So besides hooks, you have the option of creating a class component or a higher order component that wraps a functional component inside it, and you can use the state from the higher order component. So if you do not want to use hooks, you have the option of creating a class component or using a higher order component um, to mirrorize the effect of this.
Okay, okay, thank you. No more question. So you may
Okay.
go.
Okay. So the next topic I want, this is just for your information, so that after this particular workshop gets over, you have something to look forward to, or you have something to learn in future in React. So as I said earlier, React has many UI frameworks available to it. So to Angular, as we all know, Angular has Material UI, Angular has Bootstrap, etc. So UI for React also we have several UI frameworks that we have. We have Material UI, we have React Bootstrap, which is an extension of the Bootstrap already created Bootstrap, but with React functionalities added to it. We have Semantic UI, we have React Toolbox, we have Ant Design, we have React Foundation, and these are just very popular ones. We have many more UI frameworks that we have available for to design a React application. So if you want to work in React, you would obviously need to design a very good looking UI, I imagine. So having an idea about UI frameworks as well give you an up when you go for an interview, or when you go for if you even if you work as a freelancer, and if you you interview for a particular project, and if you know UI frameworks, you will have a higher up or a higher position in getting that project or getting that job, because you will know how to create seamless and clean UI with the use of several frameworks. Okay. So I would advise you to go through any of this. You can go through one, you can go through two, or you can go through three also. But you should know at least one UI framework, so that you can design the React application more easily. Okay. The next we have is popular React libraries or JavaScript to learn. Okay. Now, as we discussed in the last two sessions, the React Redux is a package that we use to enable the Redux flow into an application. We also so just like that, there are many libraries or many packages that we have for React. React is a library, and hence does not do everything on its own. So there are multiple libraries that has been available by the community of React that you can use, and you can use into your application, make your application more smarter, more flexible, and generally more performance based. So these are the four that I could think of on top of my mind. There are several other packages that you can go and search in Google for, but Redux Form is one of the most famous to create forms into React application. It provides several functionalities, several functions, specific functions for the React form to manage the state of the form. You should definitely check out. We have React Context, we have React Router. React Router, as you all know, as you can imagine from the name, React Router is used to manage the route of an application. So what if we have multiple URLs into our application? We would need to have some sort of mechanism to manage the URLs, right? So for that particular reason, we are using the React Router package in a React application to manage the routes. So you should definitely check out these libraries so that you have a better understanding of how we can enable different functionalities using different packages in a React application. Okay, now is the fun time. Let's take a look at a live example. Let me share my screen with you. Okay, I hope you can see my screen. Okay, let me amp up the font size so you can see clearly. Okay, so this is an example of a React project using Redux and hooks inside it. Okay, so just see. This is the source folder that we have all the files inside it. What the project structure is right here. We have distributed components, we have distributed reducers, and we have distributed views. So view, reducers, and components we have. This is the starting file of the application right here. We are using the app right here, and here we are adding three components. This is the simple counter, this is the name card, and this is the to-do list. Okay, so let's just first see. Let's see the simple counter function. Okay, simple counter function is the view right here. This is the functional component. As you can see, we are using the use selector. Okay, now what is the use selector? I'm just going to tell you the basics of the use selector hook. Use selector is used to get the state value stored in a store. So as you can see right here, we are using Redux. So hence we are having a store where all the state values are being stored. So in a functional component, if you want to access a store value or a state value stored in a store, we are using the use selector hook. Just like the use state, we are using the use selector hook that will get me the value that I want from the store. So what are doing use selector? We are using the state, and we are adding the counter value into this counter variable. We are using also the hooks called use dispatch. Use dispatch is used to enable the action of a Redux flow. So as I said before, views triggers an action by using a dispatch function. In functional components, we do not have the ability to dispatch anything directly. So to overcome this, hooks has a use dispatch function. Yeah. So as you can see right here, we have many buttons in the screen. I'm going to run this project in a couple of minutes, and then we can see the application output. But I just want to go through the flow of the project. So we have several buttons, and on click, we are using this dispatch variable. We use the use dispatch hook, and we are passing the type value as well. So this is the type of the action that it needs to perform. Okay. So now where is the reducer? So as you know, once a dispatch function is called, the action will go to the reducer. Now this reducer is right here. So let's say I have clicked on this button and the type is called double count. Now it will come to this counter reducer. Let's say, please mind that the init state, this is the store. The init state in the counter value is 5. And it goes to the double count, and what it does is it uses the separate state and uses the counter. So one might have a question that why do we use the separator method if we just have one value inside the state? We can just replace it entirely. But what if in the future you want to add different values inside that state? Then you will have a problem, and you will need to go through every occurrences of that and change it to separator method. So to make sure that we are using a correct way of handling the state, we are from the start only we are using the separator method. so that the value, the other value stays the same. Only the value that gets changed is what we pass to it. Okay, so what you're using is we are passing a newly created object with the value of the state and changing only the counter value by multiplying it to 2, because we triggered action with the type double count. Okay, so this is how the entire flow of the Redux works. Let's take an example of a to-do list right here. Yes, this is a to-do list. We are using use selector, we are using use dispatch, we are also using a use state with the input to do as the name, and set input to do is the function that we use to update that particular state. We are also using an error message hook right here. So what we are doing is we are dispatching whenever a new function or a new add to do is called. This is the function to add a new to do agenda. A dispatch function is called with the add to do style, and you want some payload, or you need to pass some data to it to add it. So we are also passing a new to do object with the ID and content as, that we passed. Okay, so this dispatch function will go to this reducer and called, and this is the state. As you can see, this is this initial state that we have called, and we are using the state and then changing the to-do list. We're also having a separator method for the to-do list as well, because it's an array. So we want to we want to have the previous history of that particular to-do list as well. And then we are adding the payload that we have added to the array right here. So it will be added right here. Okay. This is the JSX part of the item. As you can see right here, we have also disintegrated the to-do list component into the to-do item as well. So this is how the entire functionality is disintegrated into several components, and how we can use the React Redux. How we can use the hooks. Let me run this particular example for you. Start any project, we are using the npm start value. Okay, let it do its own thing before it gets started. Let us go through another example of removing a to-do item. Okay, so what does this? It follows the same thing. It gives you an ID. New to-do list. It new to-do list is the new variable, and that has the filtered data without the to-do ID that we have asked to remove, and then it calls a remove to do action, which goes to the to do reducer right here, and we are just updating that payload right here. Okay, as you can see, we have not used this particular separator for the to do list, because they are all the entire updated array is being passed as a payload right here. This is a new array that the filter creates it for us. So we do not need to have a separator method for the to-do list in the remove to-do section, because we are generating the entire update. We are passing the entire updated array only to this. Okay. So let's see. This is the UI that we have added. So whenever I click on it, it adds. Okay, it's the reset counter. This is the to-do list that we have. So let's add the to-do. Adding it right here. Want to remove something, you can remove it. Okay, this is another component that we have not covered right now. So this is the name card component. It uses the same methods that we have seen. Use selector, use state. Okay, So what it does, it changes the value, whatever you want. I'm just gonna add my name. Let's see. Yeah, okay. It adds like this. So this is a short example of how you can use the hooks or Redux in your application, how the flow works. Hopefully you have a better understanding after seeing this particular example or live example. This marks the end of my presentation for the day. If you have any questions, we have time. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below, uh, so that I can answer it for you and make it a little more. If you want me to repeat any of the topics, please let me know. I'm happy to do so. Ma'am, do you have any updates?
The most important question for the
Yeah.
beginners. Okay, as a beginner, you show us the various types of frameworks that we can use. So, as a
Yes.
beginner, if they want, as a student, they want to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to start with the React, then which framework is suitable for them?
Okay, so for a beginner, I would suggest you go for React Bootstrap, because many of the students will already know the Bootstrap functionalities or Bootstrap classes. React Bootstrap is the same but just a little different for the React. So Bootstrap, the Bootstrap does, we can also use Bootstrap in React, but the problem is Bootstrap uses jQuery to directly manipulate the DOM elements. Now in React, we do not have any direct DOM element. We have a virtual DOM and we contact virtual DOM to update the real DOM. Okay, so many of the Bootstrap jQuery enabled functionalities will not work in React. So we have introduced React Bootstrap for that. React Bootstrap will have several other functionalities to use the existing Bootstrap classes, and on top of it, introduce some React induced classes to it. So I think that would be a good place to start. After that, we can also use the Material UI. Material UI is very familiar and very likable across many users. So I think Material UI will also be a good start for the React application as a UI framework. And keeping in mind the React packages for a beginner, I would suggest go for I would suggest I would suggest to go start a simple project first, without hooks, without Redux. I would just start with a simple React project, get a hands-on feeling of how does the coding works and how the UI framework works in React. Once you are comfortable with the normal React application, I would suggest you add React router first, so that you can have the ability to traverse between pages like AngularJS does. So you have a single page application with different URLs. Okay. Then I would like then they can just go for React Redux package, and then they can go ahead and use hooks and various other React packages that I showed right here. So I would suggest go small and then go big, rather than go big and then have a lot of complications or a lot of confusions. I would suggest go from basic to advanced.
Yeah, thank you. One more thing that in IT industries, in companies, any
Mhm.
specific framework they follow, or they can
No,
develop it and choose the anyone.
no, not necessarily, because every project has different requirements. So, and it also based on the developer's perspective as well. So, if a developer is comfortable with the particular UI framework, they can just go with it, because UI frameworks or different packages that we discussed right now is purely based on the frameworks are made to make a developer's life easier. Okay, so whatever you frameworks that we are comfortable with, we can use it. Yeah, but if you are in a job, or if you are as a freelancer working in a project and a client asks you to use a particular framework or a particular package, then you would be bound to use that. But otherwise, there is no limitations or no specifications on using a particular framework.
Okay, okay. One more thing. If someone wants to learn regarding the React, so it's
Mm-hmm.
necessary that first they have to clear and have to learn about the Angular concepts.
No, that is not at all correct. Angular and React works parallel or doesn't have any connections. Angular JS is different, Angular 2 plus is different, and React JS is completely different. You absolutely do not have to have knowledge of Angular JS or Angular 2 plus itself to learn React. You just need to understand the concepts of JavaScript, concept of classes, arrays, functions, and a little bit of Node.js and NPM.
Okay, okay, thank you. One more thing.
Mm-hmm.
You said about the libraries, this
Mm-hmm.
to manage the routing. Most of the application has a multiple web pages, so they have to
Yeah.
manage the routing process. So React Router is the only library to manage it.
No, there are many libraries, small libraries that have to manage the routing abilities, but React Router is the official one, and it is mainly used by all developers, and it is a very vast library with many functionalities that we can use it to create a seamless routing experience. So I would suggest you go for a React Router.
Okay, okay, thank you. And the last thing that as you are also go through these technologies and industries from many years, if you
Mm-hmm.
want to share your any experience or anything that the freshers who just
Mm-hmm.
now pass out and go into the industry, they have to take care of which type of technology they have to carry with them in
Okay.
starting or how to face the interviews, technical
Mm-hmm.
interviews in the
Mm-hmm.
industry, and share your views.
Okay. So from working in the industry for last 3 years, what I have learned is based on the company that I worked in, that you should not be bound to a particular technology or a particular language. There is because the IT industry, what I feel like IT industry is just like a medical industry. And I do not mean that IT industry saves lives or do operations, no. But what I mean is that as the medical industry is always evolving, doctors are continuously researching new medicines, new surgeries, new ways to save lives. Similar in a similar fashion, IT industry is always coming up with new technologies, new libraries, new ways, new languages. Every other year, you will see every other framework or every other library. React also updates its version. Angular also updates its version. You have to be in contact with the technologies. You cannot be that I have learned React and now I do not have to learn anything new because I have learned React and that is enough for me. You cannot have that mindset going into this field. You will always need to look out or have an idea about what new things are coming into the market, because when I came into this industry, there was only one single page application framework that was huge popular, that was AngularJS. And now AngularJS is bound to get deprecated in the coming years. In 2024, AngularJS will not have the support. It will be deprecated. So in just a matter of 4 years, AngularJS has become outdated. And that does not mean people are not using it, but just that Angular people have many other more options like Angular 2 plus, React Native, Vue.js. So many options that are available to us in just a matter of 3 to 4 years. So I would not suggest a beginner, a fresher to stick to a particular technology and just have a mind, keep an open mind, I would say. That you and I mean that you can learn any technologies or you can learn any frameworks if you put your mind to it. You, of course, it will take you some time, it will take some efforts from your side to be aware of the new technologies and be keeping up to date, but it will be very beneficial to you in the long run, because you would not be left behind. You would always be up to date in regards of the industry that you work in. So please do not stick to any one technology. So right now React is very popular. Yes, you should work in it, you should learn it, and you should work in it. But please don't be closed off that you just want to work in React and nothing else. Be open to it, because tomorrow you don't know if React is gonna be as popular as it is right now, because there are many technologies that are coming up. For an example, on top of my mind, I have is Flutter. Flutter came out of the blue, and it is getting its speed up. It is getting its recognition as we speak. So you don't know the future of that particular library that you are most interested in right now. So do not stick to one technology. Be open to everything. And also I do not mean that expertise in everything. You can you cannot have an expert knowledge in every technology, but you can have an adequate knowledge of everything. You should be aware of your surroundings, as to what I mean. And whenever you go into an interview, you should have an open mind regarding the technologies that they provide. Also, I would suggest, before coming into the interview, you should have clear up your basic knowledge, because most of the companies that I know, and whenever I take some interviews, I would like to know the person's basic knowledge first. So I would always start with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and then move on to other technologies. Because what I feel like, if a person does not know the concepts of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, how they will know the frameworks from top to bottom? They Because if you do not know the basics, your advanced technology will have some sort of crack into it. So I would suggest, clear up the basic. Any technologies that you start, clear up the basic, clear up the concepts, because based on the concepts, you would get the work. And and all and just don't think about the new things that you can do it. You have a large community that you can go into the internet and search and get answers from. So I do not mug up your syntaxes, do not mug up your way of doing the code. Just understand the basics, and your syntax and your code style will develop along with your concepts. So I would suggest, clear up the basics, clear up the concepts, and and whenever you are in your interview, always use an example to make your point more clear. If you use an example to make the interviewer understand, the interviewer will have more interest in listening to your answer. As you already know, if I were to just speak, or just have a presentation with lots of text in it, and no snippets or no live example, you would probably get bored. I would probably get bored also, because nobody wants to listen someone for 2 hours, just text based presentation. So whenever you give an interview, I would suggest have anecdotes with you. Even if you have a real life example, good. If you have a technical example, then that's good, because interviewer will be able to understand if you know that concept or not according to your example. Rather than having a mugged up definition, use an example to show that you are aware of the concept.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you so much for your precious time, and this advice will be very much useful to the students as well, because
Mm-hmm.
every this TY pass out and MSc students has the first
Yes.
question, ke how we prepare for the interviews.
Yes.
They have that in mind that it's very difficult to know all the languages, all the platforms, all the technologies at the same time. So they
Yeah.
basically don't have the practical knowledge of it. But as you say, that expertise knowledge is not considered, but the adequate knowledge is important for it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Yes,
a very
because
good.
for yes, because I feel like people can work on it. If you know the basics, you can work towards the advanced values easily. Can go to the advanced functionalities easily if you know the basics of it. If you do not know ABCs, you cannot form any strings or any paragraph. If you know ABCs, you can understand the words, you can understand the sentences. So that is what I feel like it's important. And when I went for into my first interview and for in the campus interview, I what I made sure was have the basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and Java. In Java also, I did not know everything. I just knew some basics of it. And whenever you go for an internship or something, the company persons would only look out that if you have some sort of basic knowledge that they can build upon. Every company would Most of the companies would give you training opportunities in their company before putting you on a project. So they just need to know that you know the basics of it and you are able to grasp new knowledge as well. So if they provide you training, you will grasp that training and work on it and develop your skill set on it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you so much for your knowledge sharing. People want to asking that they get the resources of this workshop or not. So students, we share and mail you all 3 days resources and that presentation of the session chair as this workshop finished. So don't worry about it. And if you have any queries or if you want to share your views, you can share it over here also. And you may
Yeah.
ask to Fatima madam right now also. Shweta, over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, students, for attending and providing your precious time to us. Uh, we just take a minute that you can put up your questions if any, and the resource we will provide you by mail. And now, one thing that I like to say as our both the resource person, Milind and Fatima, is our pass out MSc CA programming students, that is alumni students, and at present they are at very good position. And as she said, you have to be ready to accept now current IT trends accordingly. So this is our pleasure that they had given their precious time, the resource person, Milinda and Fatima. They had given the very precious time to us and conducted such a nice program for you people. So it is heartily thankful from behalf of Ramakrishna Institute. And
Thank you.
I hope the students not have any other query right now.
Hmm.
So, and I hope
Yeah,
you all had provided feedback too.
yeah.
Yes, Fatima, over to you.
Students, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact the Shweta ma'am or Charmi ma'am, and I will always be in contact with them because I
Yes,
am always in contact with them. So you can
yeah,
share your questions, and I can help you getting the answers for that. And thank you, ma'am, for calling me to conduct this workshop. It was very joyful and very it's a revision for me as well.
thank you so much. Surely we will give you another opportunity if
Yeah,
we conduct any such other programs. Then we'll
yeah.
surely call you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for giving your time, everyone. Faculties here, students here, everyone. Thank you so much for attending it.
Thank
Uh,
you.
That, okay, Akshit, we will conduct a webinar for Node.js. He's interested for Node.js, he's saying. So definitely we will try another time to conduct a Node.js too.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. So we are
Thank
ending
you.
here. Uh, we will, yes, we will mail you the certificate. As we had seen, according to the feedbacks you had provided, the students who are really attended the sessions, we had got their data, and we will mail you a certificate within few days. Okay. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.